everyone. My name's Sarah Blowers and I'm the director of the Co-Creating Change Network, and it's a real pleasure to be here on a Thursday afternoon for this fantastic session. I just want to say that this is captioned, so if you need to, the link to the captions is in the chat, and all the sessions for the whole festival are available online on the AirMeet platform. That's it. I'm going to hide now and hand you over to Jennifer Jackson and Kate Cross. Thanks. Bye.
Hi everyone. Hi. Thank you for coming. I'm Jenny Jackson, pronoun she, her. I'm currently at the Egg making a Christmas show. I'm just going to briefly introduce Kate as well. Hi, Kate.
Hi everyone.
And I'm just going to crack on with our presentation. Tom, can we go to the first slide and I'll just talk you through what we're thinking of doing. I will. Here we go. Lovely. Thank you, Tom. I know it takes a slight beat for the sort of slides to appear. So I've been making a show called Thank Heaven for Little Girls, and I'm going to use it as a case study today. Can we move to the next slide, Tom? Thank you. Basically, I started the process in 2018 in terms of when I applied for a call out, and this is Patricia and Juno in rehearsals. Well, actually not on stage, actually at the Egg in the showcase, and so we're using it as a case study to kind of like unpick what it was like to make that show and the learning that happened as a result of it, and kind of how do we kind of co-create in a post-pandemic world. Can we go to the next slide, please? The Thank Heaven for Little Girls slide. Thanks, Tom. The workshop will be led by myself and Kate Cross. As I said, the workshop, the show was originally awarded a seed commission by the Egg in 2018, and I started work in 2019. Spent most of the year kind of in workshops with young girls between the ages of 8 and 12 years old. The work continues to be developed despite a hiatus due to the pandemic. And this hour will be spent breaking down how the process was led, how co-creating in the room was an active negotiation in the room. And I'm going to ask some questions about how we were co-creating with children pre and post pandemic, what that means now. We'll ask some questions to help you interrogate your own practice. And there will be, hopefully, we'll see if there's a little bit of time to take a few questions from you as well. I'm going to take you through the making of, basically, and my journey through working with a really unruly cast of amazing children. Okay, so first of all, I've introduced Kate very, very quickly, but there's a special slide for her, which is that Kate, do you want to just talk about your position at the Egg?
Yep, that's fine. Hi everyone. I'm Kate Cross. I'm the director of the Egg. I've been here for as long as the Egg's been here, so that's 16 years now. Jenny was part of our idea development program called the Incubator, which we've been running for about the last 7 or 8 years, on and off. And as she said before, and an incubator process, it follows more or less a calendar year, and the best part of that is spent in kind of free fall, playing around in total lack of certainty. Yeah, floating around in uncertainty, and being allowed to do that and being given space and time to do that with any kind of goal in particular to be working towards, although there is always a notion that we are working towards a play. We're not playing around with our ideas. We're actually working towards something that one day might become a product. And then at the end of that year of different types of interventions and provocations, we kind of throw in the industry part of it, and we stage a showcase for our sort of industry friends. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. And just to say, it's probably worth saying that this call out for Jenny was a sort of co-produced call out with the Lowry and then the Place.
Thanks, Kate. Let's go to the next slide, which is slightly awkward because it's me. Here is my slide for me. My name is Jenny Jackson, and I have been, I'm an Anglo-Bolivian theatre maker, actor, movement director and choreographer. It's quite a lot of things under my name there. And I was awarded the Leverhulme Art Scholarship to develop this piece with the Egg, and as a developed with artists at the Lowry, and then a sort of like really kind of what's the word? It was like a support in kind and logistical support sort of placement, I suppose, with the Place in London. Since then, I've been an Evolve artist with the Oxford Playhouse, and last year I was awarded a Jerwood Live Work Fund for my body of work, Take Space, of which Thank Heavens for Little Girls is a part of it. Tom, can we play the video, which sort of tells you a bit about what I'm doing without me having to ramble too much? Thank you.
My name is Jenny Jackson, and I'm the lead artist creating the work Thank Heaven for Little Girls. As an Anglo-Bolivian artist, my work interrogates the ways that women and girls use their bodies, my relationship with the UK, and the duality of living between cultures and races. Thank Heaven for Little Girls is a dance theatre performance for a cast of 8 to 12-year-old girls who will build a large edifice with power tools live on stage. The show examines the power given to girls in a metaphor for an imagined future. The piece was created from a desire to carve out a space for young children. Inspired by the devastating statistics that in the UK, girls fall out of love with STEM subjects from the age of 11, I wanted to challenge the way we view girls and disrupt our expectations about risk, play, and childhood. The rehearsal process consisted of connecting through improvisation, building an ensemble, dancing and playing. The girls performed a choreography of 30 minutes for the Eggs Incubator Showcase in 2019, and they also performed at the Place for the Touchwood Choreographic Showcase, the first time that children had featured in its history. I've been collaborating at a high level within the arts sector as a theatre maker, performer and choreographer for 10 years. My practice encompasses theatre and devising, contemporary dance, Bolivian folk dance, new writing, and the transformative aspects of sport. It is highly physical and embraces liveness. Growing up in the UK as a Latinx mixed-race artist is a source of much of the content of my work. I see myself as an artist with an international perspective, and I am currently developing a larger body of performative research titled Take Space. The triptych includes the works Wrestle Lads Wrestle, which features a community ensemble of 30 women, Endurance, a solo dance theatre show, and Thank Heaven for Little Girls. My work on Take Space proposes that as a material culture, space is not innate and inert, but that it is an integral and changing part of daily life, intimately bound up in social and personal rituals and activities. To demand space is political. The visibility and invisibility of certain bodies has been magnified during the pandemic, and the digital body has emerged. Women and girls, however, continue to fight for space, digitally, physically, and in recorded history. Take Space is a permission, an instruction, a joyful order.
Thank you, Tom, for playing that. So the making of, basically, the Thank Heaven for Little Girls was one part of my development in moving away from being a collaborator and becoming a lead artist. And I've been working as a collaborator on projects that span a range of performance styles and forms for many years. And I was starting to have ideas about things that I wanted to make on my own. And what I didn't really know is how to make something this big and how to make something this big with children. We didn't really have the chance to have an official evaluation for this process. And as we started to look to actually how we actually forge the piece in the future, the pandemic hit. So the walkthrough of the making of serves to provoke us and help me understand how to do it better with children, and hopefully will provoke questions in our own practice about how we can make ambitious work with children. So swiftly to part one, which is the bit where I had an idea to co-create a piece of work with 10-year-old girls, or where did the idea come from and how did I start? I was out and about and I heard the Maurice Chevalier song, Thank Heaven for Little Girls, playing in a shop. And I was quite shocked that it was still being played. And I'd forgotten it because I remember seeing the musical Gigi a long time ago. And so it was just a bit of a surprise that it was like, oh, this song still exists. And has been given airplay. And so I had quite a lot of rage about it because the lyrics are quite provocative, and I didn't quite know what to do with it. So I went home and I YouTubed it and I got even more angry. Around the same time, I was having a conversation with my brother, who is a scientist, about the fact that there weren't any women in his postgrad department at his uni, and they were trying to find a way to recruit more women. And there were hardly any undergrad, is what he was saying. And then he was saying that actually then you're seeing that there's much less A-level as well. So that started me thinking about, you know, the research onto like why are there no women moving into science, or less women moving into science. I watched a piece called The Land, which is about adventure playgrounds. I thought about the theory of many parts of like not dictating how children should play. And I was thinking a lot about the fact that I did judo as a young girl. And so my relationship with my body was, it was quite robust. I felt like really embodied, and I felt like I could do things like climb trees, and like I go into every single physical kind of game thinking that I'm going to win, even if I'm not going to win. So there was something where I was like, hang on, how many other children had this experience of being able to use their body in a certain way? And why aren't there like pockets in skirts and things, and all the things that kind of prevent young girls from playing so sort of like embodied, really. And then I saw the call out for a dance stage show for young audiences that Kate described. And for one of the first times in my life, well, at that point, I applied for an open call out, and I had to pitch it, and I didn't really know what it was. So I had to talk about the girls who were only existed in my imagination. And I had to describe this idea when bits of it felt very clear, and other bits felt really foggy. And the bit of it that felt really clear to me was the image of a whole load of young girls kind of doing really cool, brilliant stuff, technical things, you know, things that we don't imagine that children are capable of, and them doing it with like agency and with really wholehearted, and that the girls would be really joyful and dangerous and really challenge what we think about children and childhood. Tom, if we can skip through the pictures, I can just show you a few of the images from the sharing. There's Priscilla with her cricket bat looking really fierce. And the next one, yeah, thank you. And so this was like Minnie with her lovely sort of big helmet there, looking fierce as well. So lots of this images were taken from the showcase, but at the time of pitching, I didn't really know how to describe this thing that I was seeing. And I've realised that as an artist, one of the things I have to do is get really good at sort of like articulating what the idea is. So my question to you is, could you describe your idea in 20 words? An idea for a show that you've made, or an idea for a show that you want to make. And it has to include the fact that it's co-created. So that would be my provocation to us as a starting point. And you can type it in the chat, or you can write it down for yourself in your notebook or in your phone, or just have a think about it. Shall I put that in I'll put that in the chat. There we go. 20 words. Yeah, describe your idea in 20 words. Kate, is there anything you want to say about them? Sort of when I came to you and sort of with the idea.
Well, we did a call out, and we saw about 20 artists in Bath and another 20 artists in Manchester. We saw some great ideas and some, lots of artists that we didn't know. So there's, a lot to be said for doing call outs. Artists that we now have gone on to work with ourselves or at the Lowry. But I have to say that we were unanimously sold on this idea as soon as Jenny walked through the door. It didn't really require all that much discussion. And I suppose that's because it was, I think what I said earlier, we were in a place of like, there was a strong visual picture in our head, but this kind of chasm of uncertainty between us and it. And I think that was kind of inspiring and seductive.
Thanks, Kate. If you've got them, you can type them into the chat, but otherwise you can take that as a provocation for yourself to kind of, try and articulate the idea. The second bit, part 2, is where I decided which girls I didn't want to work with, or how on earth do you find the right people, and how do you say no to children? During the process, I I've been in a lot of kind of rooms where you've selected people for shows or for rehearsal projects and things, and so I was drawing on every single kind of amazing room I'd been in with Company 3, every kind of sort of like community company I'd ever worked with, and sort of pulled all that practice into devising this workshop. And I spent some time with Fever Sleep and talking to David Harradine about like, how do you encourage children to play in a space where they get something out of the workshop, even though at some point I'm going to have to select from a group of, there was like 30 children, I think, that we had, and we knew that we wanted around 10 for the production if we were going to, when we're going to make it, but we knew we needed around 15 to kind of workshop with, because of the fact that children have really busy lives and, you know, all of that stuff and dropouts and things that might happen along the way. And I was just really nervous when they came into the room, of like needing to be the expert and needing to kind of hold that space for them. And I suppose what I learnt during that process was creating spaces for play and having a few rules that I could kind of establish for them to kind of exist in, and then also sort of segmenting the audition process into a place where we warm up and we have games, and the warm up is fun, and we get to know each other. And then also that there is a little bit of technique that I teach, a little bit of dancing that we would look at, so that they felt like they had something to hold on to and use. And then we went into improvisations, and I just put loads of music on and we played and we sort of talked a bit and had some discussions. And then from that, I sort of moved into, the selection process, which involved sitting in cafes and talking about each girl and feeling really, really bad that I had to kind of say no to some of them. There just wasn't enough space to be able to, or budget to be able to hold a ridiculously large group of young performers. And then also sort of engaging with that question of like, was I looking for 10-year-old me? Like, you can't help when you're in a room, kind of sort of trying to identify which person you would have been as a child, and sort of like, am I looking for the 10-year-old me that I'm trying to give a chance to, and sort of really interrogating that. And then also, you know, like, what happens when you just don't like some of the children that are in the room? You know, we have permission to dislike adults, but we don't have permission to dislike children. And so that feels really difficult when you're like, oh, actually that performer's not quite right for this, because their personality doesn't feel like it's fitting with the rest of the company. And I found that really, really hard, because it was the first time I was in a position where I had to select from a group of people to come and play. And then how do you say no? And that's where having the experience of the place and the egg behind me to be able to frame those conversations with parents in a way that was like healthy, and that we were managing expectations from the get-go, really. So, but I still found that very, very difficult. One of the things that we talked about a lot was who wasn't in the room, the demographics of the buildings that we're working with, and the kinds of people that we were able to reach through the outreach departments were predominantly white and not affluent, but like would have facility to come to classes at the place, for example. And so it meant we had to work really hard to try and find a range of girls. And that was really difficult, because in my head I'd imagined like lots of girls that were very ordinary, and like, what I mean by ordinary, I mean like real, just like real girls that sort of are interested in sort of what girls are interested in. And they might not have spent, you know, every Saturday at a ballet class. But because of the way that we were like looking for people and limits on budget in terms of how much time and money we could spend on looking for people, there was, for me, a lack of access to disabled children, and how long that takes to be able to find those girls and create the space for them to come and join. And we tried really, really hard. And that was one of the moments, that was one of the moments for me where I felt really sad that we hadn't managed to find those girls to bring them into the process. And I suppose my question to us is, all of us, is like, what happens if like the people that you find are the wrong people, that, you know, they're people, but they're like, you're trying to find or reach a lot of like very specific people, and what happens when you're not able to find them? Because for me, bringing together the cohort was a political choice, And if I couldn't deliver on that, then what do I do? I felt very compromised in that way. And obviously I had to move on with the project, but it's a part of my thinking that next time that I would absolutely put enough time in place to find those young girls that were that had, that were disabled and would need quite a lot of access to get them in the room. So yeah, that's my question to us is, where will you find your co-creators? And what will you do if the people that show up are the wrong sort of people? In the best possible way, but not the people you're really, really hoping to sort of to reach. I'm going to skip through to number 3. Shall I put that in the chat? Let me see if I can do that. Just get that in the chat there for you. Where will you find your co-creators, and what will you do if people that show up are the wrong sort of people? So these are the things that I sort of, have had to sort of think about moving forward. Okay, and then this bit, part 3, which is the meat and potatoes of it, I think, which is the bit where I try to put a nail gun into the hands of a 10-year-old girl, or how to engage with risk whilst keeping everyone safe. Risk was a big part of making this show. The process, I went to Ghent to talk to Copperhedra, the theatre, and to Bronx, who obviously, as we know, make really exciting work with and for young audiences. I spent a lot of time talking to David Harradine. I spent a lot of time talking to Carly Weiss, who did Us Them with Bronx, which won all the awards in, I can't remember, 2012 or something, which was a piece for young audiences about trauma. And we talked a lot about how to make really provocative work that was co-created and created agency in the room for young people and what that means. Tom, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. We talked a lot about risk and play. We started working with Diane Murray, who is an inclusive play specialist, who came down to visit us when we were starting our rehearsals at the place, and took us all outside and made us negotiate things that we were scared of. Children were climbing trees and dealing with feeling like they were sort of scared, and seeing how they overcame trying to get higher in the tree, and how the girls kind of negotiated that. And then also in negotiating risk in the rehearsal room as well, the emotional and psychological risk that happens when groups of people get together and friendship groups are formed, and so-and-so wants to be friends with you but not with you, and all of the kind of nuance of that was sort of in the mix of the room, and that was also sort of artistic risk as well, because I was asking children to be to improvise with very little kind of teaching around it. I was teaching a bit of contemporary dance, and I was taking them through kind of improvisations with characters sometimes, but a lot of the time we'd set up a very simple rule and then we'd play, and I would let them play for a long time, introducing props or taking props out and bringing in different provocations. And so there was quite a lot of risk for young people to sort of go up and kind of do something, when I haven't told them how to do it. So that was a real learning experience for me in terms of how much kit do they need to be able to really play fully. We went to an adventure playground where they were allowed to take risk in all sorts of ways that made everyone feel very nervous. And that was really exciting to me. I wonder if we can go to the video, Tom, of when the girls told me when I was going down the zip wire. Just the way that they were playing really freely in the space and this moment in the process.
You will not die. You will. You will survive. Goodbye, Tim. I survived and I got carried off. Definitely gonna survive.
My name is you're not going to survive. She's not sugarcoating this at all.
Tim, my God. You can do it. Do not get hurt.
I'm scared.
Thanks, Tom. So yeah, there was like the moment when they just were like, you're going to die. And there was something in them when they're in that place of really playing and really telling me what they think that I really wanted to kind of like engage with and somehow find a space for on stage, which obviously is like really, really hard, because like playing is one thing and then placing that play on stage is quite another. So that was a big tension for me in the space. And then slime, we talked a lot about slime, and I tried to use slime as an expression of science on stage, and the fact that children are amazing at using, like, making slime, you know, like, and it's science. But then the reality of watching slime on stage was not that exciting, even though they were having a great time making it. And so there was this tension between like my artist voice and like them, like, because I wanted them to be really proficient at something that they're experts in, and sort of going, actually, sometimes those things are not necessarily the right things to express what I'm looking for, or what I'm like, kind of how clever they are. But we had a lot of fun making slime. And then also the improvisation, this idea of like risk and authorship and giving girls agency in the room. But then what that means when I have to sculpt that as the outside eye, and what that means when you're working with movement material, where if they're allowed to free-form dance, then often they'll use like palettes. Well, my girls were often, not my girls, I can't believe I call my girls, but the girls in the team were like often using like, do you see, that's really interesting. I'm like, because I feel like they're part of my family. That's the thing. It's really tricky. It's really tricky. But I feel like they were like they would repeat patterns of movement that they've seen. So either on music videos, and now it will be TikTok, but like often the idea of them really expressing themselves through dance came out in like this really interesting form of like ballet that was like not trained, but this idea of grace. And I was getting them to wrestle and stuff. So we had this like tension between them wanting to do cartwheels and look really beautiful and do this ballet, and then maybe like get on the floor and wrestle. And so like, how do you provide enough technique so that they've got something to play with and subvert themselves, but then also there should be like, what's the space for their offers? One thing that happened, I don't think I'm gonna be able to find it in the video for you, unfortunately, this second, is that we had a section of movement where they all ran to the front of the stage, and they did a very specific kind of contemporary piece of movement that I had choreographed for them, that looks very different in each of their bodies. And it's a very small moment. It's a very small piece of choreography that loops, but they could run to the front and then change it in whatever way they wanted. And I didn't set that. So we just like saw what happened when they were improvising, just this sort of wave of movement. And one of the girls, Poppy, got to the front and just looked at me and didn't really know what to do for a little while. And then just kind of shimmied all the way back like this with a big smile on her face. And it was a moment of pure shock for me, because it felt like I didn't quite know what to do with this offer. It was like quite provocative. But also it was like she knew that there was an effect happening for me, for everyone watching. And so there was something about the slight anarchy of that. Like, does she know what that movement means? Or does she know a little bit about what it means, and so she's provoking me to see what I'm going to do with it? Like, so there was something in that tension that I found super interesting in the room, having that moment, which we ended up staging with her in the incubator showcase, where some of the girls were doing this very kind of like this piece of technique, and Poppy was sort of doing this slightly anarchic thing, which felt really risky, actually. And what does it mean to kind of like, when a child takes a risk, and I want to back that risk a little bit, but I know that it's like quite provocative, like, and what my role is in that as the artist. So that felt quite tricky, and but also interesting in terms of like what it means to really, really ask a girl to play really fully in the space. And that question for me of like how to choreograph and co-create, so like how do I sculpt and co-create, and that tension. And I don't really know that I know how to do it. It still feels like it's an active negotiation every single time. And so my question would be, what are you prepared or not prepared to do with a co-creator for yourself? What are you prepared or not prepared to do with a co-creator?
put it in the chat already, Jenny.
Oh, you're a star. Thank you. I was trying to do the 3 things at once. And we've got a little like have that. So I understand that it's like you might want to be taking notes for yourself or like having these as provocations to think about later. These are the things that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about where I've been with the show and what I want to do with it in the future. But Kate and I were like, let's do a poll. Let's ask a question, which is really brutal in terms of like this idea of risk and responsibility when working with co-creators, especially children. So my poll would be, should you put a nail gun into the hands of a 10-year-old girl? Can we do that as a poll? Oh, it's in there. Is it in there? Yeah. Yes, no. This whole piece is really trying to get like the idea of young girls playing with, and I use the word playing with in the double way of like building something really competently, building an edifice in a metaphor for an imagined future. Like, what would it look like to actually have a small girl nailing something in, not just a hand tool, but a thing that had like the idea of risk in the room and like just challenging that. And I suppose the most brutal thing for me is the expression of that is a nail gun, like the most scary thing that I can imagine, even holding myself. Yeah. Should you put a nail gun in the hands of a 10-year-old girl? Big question. Kate, do you want to say something? Yeah,
I do actually. I'm guessing that the 100% of people who've said yes are of the sort of on the artistic side of making work, rather than on the general management side of making work. I don't want to make assumptions here. But I know that I would have, if I tried to do that here, I would have met with some resistance. Some of it would have been kind of sense of moral duty, but that would have been backed up by the firm point that we wouldn't have been able to get the piece insured. But there is a kind of there is a question around kind of, is there a difference between putting a nail gun in a child's hands in a workshop situation versus putting a nail gun in a child's hands whilst they're performing to an audience under stage lights, for example, in a kind of performative environment? And I do think there's perhaps a nuanced conversation to have around that.
Yeah, I agree, because I also think there's like there have been some amazing live art pieces where children have been using power tools and electronic tools, not just hand tools, and it's very carefully choreographed, like it's very carefully taken care of. So, and I know one of the things that Di Murray said was like, as long as something is like fit for purpose, then you can play, like, then actually there's a different conversation to be had. So I was looking at drills, for example, and if it's like got the battery pack inside it, it's super heavy and it's really big, and it's just like, there's no way a small hand is going to be able to hold that and manipulate it. But there are some really tiny, nimble kind of drills that are attached to the main. So like there is a conversation about like, okay, so what would happen if you kind of created an image where someone was like taking their time to plug it into the wall, and we saw all the health and safety being sort of taken care of, and like, I don't know, there's something in that that's like, you're right, the performance of it, which I'm still super interested in. So we did have this conversation. I'm going off piece a little bit because I'm excited, but this is the thing. They did. I was like raised. We talked about it. So I introduced it quite softly because I think I was quite scared as an artist. But loads of them would use like a chainsaw with their granddad, which just took me aback. And I was like, what did they? Just tell me, like, what did they do? How did you do it? And like the instructions were like really simple, just don't avoid your fingers. And but I was like, well, of course, if someone is guiding you and teaching you, then of course you can kind of, like that. I found it, I was really surprised because I was expecting them to all say, no, we've never done anything like that, we would want to. But they really love like building stuff and making stuff. That's the thing that I discovered, was the act of making and building for them was like, we could easily lose. And when I say lose, I mean like in terms of my planning versus like what's happening in the room, an entire 2 hours to kind of building something. I know it's like, can we go to the video of cardboard? Yeah, exactly, Anna. I think that's we went in the adventure playground, we played with fire. It was and we built So that's, where we were sort of like, I was trying to find like substitutions for the scary thing to ask, which is like, can we play power tools? So we were building with cardboard and stuff, and I was using slime as a sort of substitute. And I think that's where I was like, I was shying away from like the actual risky thing of like, what does it mean? How is it possible to kind of engage with this kind of risk? But you can kind of see they're up on each other's shoulders. They're really involved. They'll put a really high thing. They're sort of, and they're really active, and like they were really into it. And it was always for me fascinating to watch them in that mode where they're kind of problem solving and doing all this stuff. And part of in the sharing, I kind of staged a whole building which was super risky to do, because I was like, I don't know how interesting this is going to be. This is going to be beyond like 4 minutes. But I loved watching them do that. And then also like this active destruction, because often they quite like destroying things, as I've not this particular group of girls. So can we play the video where from the sharing where Priscilla sort of completely destroys the tower and just really turns on the fierce and becomes really like... Lovely, thank you. So there was something for me about the ear defenders was really, the imagery of them actually, like they just loved all the kind of like kit that they're not normally that's just not normally necessarily in their world. Yeah, there was like the big helmets and stuff were just all of that language with them, like I found super exciting. So on to the next bit, which is the bit where I got seduced by the girls and lost my artistic voice. Tom, can we have that slide? Thank you for playing those videos. Authorship and how to hold on to your artistic voice process and being in the shit. I don't know how to do this. I fell in love with everybody, and even the ones where they were really challenging, I loved them very, very much. And that was really interesting when starting to kind of try and shape the work into something. What happens when you get too close to them? There was lots of things that contributed to me, like struggling to keep an eye on like facilitation and delivery and creating space to hold them, and then trying to like work out how to make this show, and the whatever the vision had been for that, and like how relevant is it now that I'm in the room with these girls, and that being like a constant tension. Things like I didn't anticipate that I would need more staff in the room, which I think now I would have needed like an extra set of eyes to kind of like do the pastoral stuff, so that I could have some time away from delivery to kind of think about what we're making and what we're seeing. There are a few things that resulted in my the fact that like getting to spend time with other people's children is a real honor and a privilege, and I didn't want to waste their time on my show. I feel a bit like, it felt like they would, in a way, I ended up at a point sometimes I'm like, they're doing me a favor by being here. And actually we were collaborators and we were co-creating together. But there was moments when I was like, I feel like I have to call them all of the time and use them all of the time because they're giving their time here. Like this is a really precious part of their life, their Sunday mornings. Thank you, Kate. The pastoral support. And I think what I mean by that is like there being an additional person in the room to be able to kind of help me to be able to deliver exercises so that I could watch a little bit. That's what I mean, Kate. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for clarifying that. And therefore the pressure as well to use all of the girls all of the time, when actually I could have called one or two people for a session and tried something very specific with them. And I realize that now, the whole process of trying to build an ensemble and how to not do hands up. I was looking over some video footage where when someone's got a question about something mid improvisation, they'll stick their hands up. And then of course, and I was just like, oh, how do I not do the hands up? This is really hard. But then also, if they all just talk over each other all the time, which is like super exciting to be a part of, like to hear kind of how they can kind of generate so much energy. But also there being moments when actually hands up was the only way to kind of like make sure everyone's voice was heard. And I didn't want to do that. So that's things like that. Giving them my practice and them not giving a shit about my practice, giving them my practice and them taking it and transforming it beyond what I expected. I loved giving them my practice and they just were like, yeah, all right. It's like a real shock to kind of go, oh, that thing that normally works in a room with like these people doesn't work here. Like that was kind of a real grounding thing for my practice in general, and kind of what to do when that happens, like kind of making sure. And that's where I think an additional pair of hands, creative pair of hands in the room could have like juggled that a little bit more for me. So so that I could play more. And then writing with the girls, like we did loads and loads of free writing, which was really cool. And then, but also sort of out of that came a number of things that I didn't want to stage because I felt like I didn't know if it was okay to stage it. So, for example, one thing we did was some of the girls had a kill list, which I didn't know anything about. And then the video that I showed you at the very beginning, one of the girls writes on the slide to kill or not to kill. And she told me that like a few of them had this list. Actually, I didn't know anything. I didn't really know that this sort of was a thing. But they would have a list of all the people that they hated, and they were on their kill list. And it was just brutal. It was like an 8-year-old girl telling me, and she could just reel off all the names. And we sort of staged that moment, which was really funny, and just the glee in reading out these names, which just, again felt like a mode of which I haven't necessarily seen girls on stage before, and I wanted to kind of give that a bit of space. But also we looked at, I don't know if you remember, it's really industry this bit, but like there was a call out, a breakdown for an advert for a 10-year-old girl, and it was the Milka advert, where they described the character of the girl as if she was like a 25-year-old woman in a romance movie, and it was really, really, really difficult. And so I took out all the stuff that was like very blatantly sort of like kind of romantic, and just sort of did the sections which were like she has the hair, like the wind blowing through her hair, and she listens to David Bowie, and like that's literally what they said in it. And I brought that to the table, and they all auditioned for this part, and it was hilarious. Like it was hilarious. And some of them were like really angry about it because they knew more than the other girls about like what they were hinting, what the people were looking for, and that it was a bit ridiculous to ask a 10-year-old to do that. And some of them were like, I think that's me. I'm very attractive, which was also like really interesting to have a range of different things. But they would audition for the part, and one of them got up and just like told us how much they loved David Bowie. It just went on for like 5 minutes, and it was really funny. But again, I was like, it felt really like I wasn't sure quite how much they knew about the context of it. And that's where I felt like ethically, I wasn't sure whether to stage that or not. And so this is where it was like some of the decisions were made, I think sometimes out of fear, and other times out of love, where I was like, I didn't want to take advantage of them in some way, I think. So my question to you is, has there been a time when you were unable to separate yourself from your co-creators, and how did you deal with it? Yeah, let's move on to the next slide. This is the bit where the funding requirements fucked up. Oh, sorry. I've just sworn on a thing. I'm very sorry. Messed up my process. Oh dear. Welcome to my world today. Or money versus ideals and dealing with our funding models. And what this actually meant in reality. So I had limited time with the girls. It was a time-sensitive piece. I had like 9 months or something of a couple of hours a week to kind of work with them. And and so that felt sort of that 9 months was not enough to kind of like R&D the kind of entirety of what the show could be, but also that it takes time to earn trust with children, and that, so there was an element where I was like just really hoping that we got on. So there was that, and then things like we were invited to come and present at Touchwood at the place, which is a real honor. And the girls, we did a 10-minute showcase for them, and it was a real honor to have a full sort of like a company just of children on that stage, and just girls on that stage, just sort of performing and taking up space. And what it meant was it was a late edition. And what it meant was that I had a limited time with the girls after Touchwood before we did the incubator showcase. So whatever we presented at the place would probably have to be what we presented at incubator, because there wasn't enough time to kind of change necessarily the work. We only had like maybe 2 afternoon sessions to get them ready for the presentation at the Egg. And I think that's where there was a moment of having to kind of select material for an industry showcase before I think the material was ready to be presented in that way, or framed in that way. I think it was great that we were performing, but it was tricky. And at the time it was like, well, this is what we do. But looking back, the work is embryonic and it's co-created. And so we'd only really scratched the surface of what that co-creation actually meant. And also that some of the things that we were choosing to stage were possibly simpler expressions of what we were trying to explore in the bigger sort of workshops that we were doing on the Sundays. And also the whole trying to get to, like, we had to try and get the girls to Bath. We could only take them out of the school for one day. So we had to get them back there and back in one day. We had to move them into a separate venue because we just needed a slightly different staging for them, which just meant that we were it just felt like we were kind of, there wasn't really any space to relax and kind of really sit into the fact that we were going to just share some stuff with people for the first time. And that was really, possibly really exciting. And then also sort of presenting the work to sort of really friendly people and families and stuff, but also programmers were there. And what does pitching actually mean when I'm putting children on the stage who are still experimenting with the work? We're still working out what it is, and yet on some level the work is being judged about in terms of like, is it programmable? What is it saying to an audience right now? And so there was something in that felt really sort of, there was a tension there. And then also the decision to test something really test something with an audience, and this amazing crack team of girls who had sort of spent 9 months with me playing and dancing. And that was really interesting. And in a way, part of that was allowing them to build this tower for, 5 minutes of stage time, 8 minutes of stage time, however long they did it. And also allowing there to be that section where Patricia completely destroys the tower, there being space for them to own that moment and hold that space without any intervention from me to move them on. Like, that moment lasted as long as the girls decided it lasted on stage, which felt like I really liked doing that. But the risk was that if it didn't quite fly in some way, because they are children, because they're children and they're amazing, but they are children, and repeating things is a very different ask. Like what that actually means, and so I'm really glad that I did test it, but there was a tension there. Kate, do you want to say anything? I'm sort of going into this.
Yeah, sure. I'll come at it from the point of view of any of you who have your own kind of artist or idea development programs, because it is quite, well, it's interesting, as you know. Whenever I'm sort of using my kind of rhetoric around the incubator, I always kind of take the piss out of myself towards the end, where because I start off talking about this kind of space and time to, to mess around with your really big ideas and with no sense of kind of end game. And then we mess with all of that at the end of the year, and we put 10 to 20 minutes sort of scratch versions or sort of sample versions in front of our industry friends. And yes, as Jenny says, that is a funding imperative. It's not an imperative of the funding actually that's funded the process that far. It's more as you know, to do with, well, look, if this idea is going to gain any traction after this kind of funded period of research and development, then some other potential partners need to see that its potential. So it would be a kind of wasted opportunity if it was just left to us and the artists to keep on describing it to people. But we've always been really, really mindful at the Egg of trying to really, really hold that presentation process and not sort of beguile the delegates and the audience into thinking that they're watching anything that is finished or final. And I think what Jenny has sort of experienced on that day at the Incubator Showcase was that there is a sort of sense of a sort of familial sense in the Egg. If any of you have ever been to the Egg, it's very small, it's very cozy, it's kind of embracing, and it's forgiving. And then we all got on a coach and we went out to Bath Spa University into a fairly sort of architected kind of theatre, and we had to wait quite a long time for the piece to start. And so by the time the piece started, we all thought we were there to watch a play. And I think that just gave a really different kind of unfortunate kind of framing experience for the people who were watching it. But when you tie all that in with everything that Jenny's described about the kind of nuances of authorship and the authenticity of the children or not the authenticity of the children and everything else, you know, you've got such a kind of multi-layered kind of problematic situation at work here. But I think, you know, the big learning point is that those artists who are working on, you know, yes, messy ideas, difficult ideas, but generally speaking with their own collaborators, you know, when they're working with people that they might have worked with for many, many years, it's less exposing to then ask them to put on a piece at a showcase in front of industry partners and so on, than it is to ask somebody like Jenny with a bunch of children from lots of different walks of life, you know, having a sort of day out. And I think that therefore we would have done well to have reconsidered what Jenny's presentation might have been, given that it was a co-creation piece and given that it was a co-creation piece with children.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, and I wonder if, like, my decision eventually to not attempt to stage power tools in that moment was one of the ways in which I kind of sort of was trying to frame it in a way like I wasn't quite ready to kind of put that image on in front of anyone yet. And that's really the crux of like of children doing something really proficient and beyond what we expect of them. You know, and I could have like lined up all the tools on the stage and just had a girl looking at them for a minute, and that would have been enough to sow the seed for a programmer, like do like that sort of thing. But I was in the middle of co-creating at the time, and I was like trying to forge something that had an arc for it's super interesting. I think I'd really like to ask the question for you as well, like just give us an example, or like think of an example when you disrupted or rejected a funding requirement, and what that meant. While we're thinking about that question, Tom, can we play the video that is the dance video? So not the rehearsals, it's the dancing, and it's video 7. I don't know what it's called in the file box. Sorry, Tom, is that? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So for me, there's something about like the sort of creating the space for moments like that to happen, and how I put them on stage. Someone asked a question of I know who doesn't want to float around. What I love is the floaty red skirt with the helmet and the building. It's like all of that stuff all happening and can exist in that complex place that children are able to hold. I find super exciting. Yeah, and I think there is something about process versus the product, and I think that for me that was a real tension. Like the process was really important, but I also want to make a show where these young people are on stage and seen, and their art is seen as important and incredible because they're capable of making amazing art. So that's, yeah, for me that tension is huge. I know we're running out of time because of stuff, but because of a thing called time. But we'll do the last slide, Tom, the bit where I realised why people say never work with children or animals, or why I'm still going to try and make this play, but it's going to be hard, and why are there no structures in place for this to happen. Yeah, we've already talked about the showcase from a logistical point of view, like the whole there and back in the day. And like I've written a thing about stage management, saying not from the egg. My point about that was that like when the sort of needing to have that team, because we had a stage manager who was brilliant, but was like trying to make friends with all these girls in the space of one day. And that was really hard, you know, for that person and also for the girls. And like having those budget lines in place like super early on so that it's completely supported is something that I would definitely do that. And then like making sure there wasn't really time for me after the sharing because the girls had to get back to London to discuss the work with them, you know. And what do we do with like when children drop out, which they do, you know, and participants always drop out of projects because they have lives, and that sort of stuff, and all the things that are like all the logistics that go around like trying to make work with participants and particularly with children, and you know, asking like, is it worth it? I know what my answer is, but for me it is. But like, and then just thinking about like, is there a time when it went wrong, and how did you? Yeah, what would have happened if the children didn't want to make a show? Yeah. Well, one of them did after the showcase. One of them was like, I don't want to do this anymore, so I'm going to do ballet class. And I was like, that's totally fair enough. Yeah, they yeah, then that's the show. Yeah. They always wanted to make a show, and I think that was the difference for my group of artists and the group of participants that were in the room. We had come together to make a piece, and I think that was the offer from the get-go. So the expectations were that we were going to make something together, and it was going to be performed, and it would be a bit of theatre, and it'd be a bit of dance, and some other stuff around play. And so, because we were all there with that purpose, I didn't have to worry about that too much. But there have been other projects that I've been on where, you know, is a show the right kind of avenue for this work? Is a really valid question. Yeah, yeah, and. Yeah, and I suppose like the question about was there a time when it went wrong, and who with your co-creators and what happened. And I think going wrong can be like a number of things. Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is the question around like how do we get to spend time with children at a time when they've been not locked away, but we've all had to stay away from each other and have had to be at home for a lot of the time, and we're not able to kind of do the work in the same way, you know. So yeah, that's definitely a big thinking point for me. And I think, you know, I'm going to just answer the why slide, which is that I still believe in the work. I still believe in the work. So I still think that children are underrepresented in art, and that they need to be represented with more nuance than they are currently. I still want to work with children because they continue to surprise me. And I still think the piece is relevant because just the way that the world has been swinging for women and girls at the moment in terms of safety in public, in public spaces, and like taking up space and opportunity. It just feels like right now, I want to see more girls being given agency. Yeah, it's really tricky. And the catch up, I think that's really, really interesting at the moment is like this idea of catching up on all the lost academic time. That for me is like I'm hugely aware of that. I suppose I'm gonna leave, because I know we're super out of time, leave this last question, which is how on earth do we produce something like this? This big idea for young audiences and their families, like how, that's the question for me. It's like, how do we make that? How do we make something like this happen?
Email us your answers.
Yeah. There's been a whistle-stop tour through the show, and kind of my experience in making it and what I've been learning about making it. Yeah, that, I mean, yeah. Thank you, Sarah's back. Hello.
I've been here all the time. Thanks everyone, and thanks for that session, and I really want to see the show.
I so want to make it. I'm desperate to make it, but yeah, there's such big questions around sort of, around how to produce something like this. Like how do we give children this experience, you know, like what are the avenues now in a post-pandemic world for something like this to happen? Yeah.
Thanks so much, both of you.